So I will go back to sharing our presentation. So yes, welcome tonight to the Career Accelerator webinar. In this webinar, basically, I'm going to show you how you can up-level your career in 2021. I'm hoping that by the end of our time together, you're going to learn how not to make the most common mistakes I saw in my career. And I will also hold my hand up and say, not only did I see them, I made most of them, and how to create a strategic plan for career success for you in 2021. So stay with me till the end. It is only an hour, but for those of you who are on tonight and stay with me, I will send you an email tomorrow with my core value discovery guides as a bonus for joining me tonight. And I know it's an hour, but hopefully we can turn off all distractions. Honestly, the information I hope to share with you tonight will be really helpful. So it's worth being distraction free just for this 1 hour. So I do want to hear from you, as I was just saying. I'd love to hear, who are you? Where are you calling in from? And if you can share what you're hoping to get from the webinar tonight. While I have an agenda set to follow, I obviously also am happy to go off script. So while we have a bit of a Q&A time at the end, I'm happy to take any questions throughout. So you can jump in either the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen, or you can go into the chat. I'll have to jump in and out of sharing my full screen just so as I can make sure I can see the chat, but I will pause at the end of each of the pillars. So jump in chat. I'd love to know who you are, where you're calling in from, and what you're hoping to get out of this evening. And while I do that, I'll just share a little bit about who I am. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Trasa Fitzgibbon. As you can probably tell by the accent, I'm Irish. But I have spent the last 22 years of my career in banking. And that was spread from Dublin for a number of years, London for 10 years, and then New York actually for the last 6 years. I am currently residing in Ireland. COVID hit in March of this year, obviously, as I was visiting family. So I've decided to stay here on the west coast of Ireland, which is fabulous to get time with family, but definitely missing the weather of some other locations. I'm seeing more rain than I'm used to this time of year. But as I said, 22-year career in banking. I ended my career as a managing director of a global sales team based out of New York. A couple of years ago, I started transitioning my career over to coaching, and I am a certified transformation coach. And I also have some qualifications in what's called NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. We'll talk a little bit about those neural pathways in the brain. EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and I'm also a qualified health coach, which is a passion of mine. So I am going to stop that for a moment. I can see we have at least one person. Okay, so we've got Kansas. Oh, we've also got Austin, Texas. That's great. So everybody who's on the call this evening, there's going to be different reasons that you chose to join. For some of you, you may be feeling a little bit overwhelmed in your career right now or in your job, or maybe you're feeling overlooked. You're working really, really hard, but not getting the recognition that you believe you deserve. Or you're just not sure how to get that next promotion. You're getting a lot of vague feedback like, you need to be more visible, you need to be more confident, we need to see more of X. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Or maybe you just want to take control of your own career. You're sort of a little bit tired of everybody else dictating where you get to go and when you get promotions. Now's the time to sort of step up and do that yourself. So where we're going to go this evening, just so you have an idea of the format, excuse me, we're going to spend a few minutes on just the common mistakes, as I said, that I've seen and made over my career. A little bit on beliefs. So while that might sound a little bit strange for Career Accelerator, our beliefs are really what set us up for success. We're then going to talk about promotions committees. So I had the privilege over my career to be on a number of promotion committees. And I can honestly say once I joined them, I realized what was discussed in that room was extremely different from what I thought was discussed with that room. So I'm going to share a little bit of information about that. Obviously nothing confidential, but just sort of the conversations that do happen. We're going to talk about strategy and specifically what strategy you can use to help your career. And then we're going to talk about advocating for yourself. You know, I know it's tough. I know many of us think that it's seen as bragging or boastful, but advocating for yourself is going to be key to your success. Then a little bit about how to work with me before we move into a live Q&A, assuming we obviously haven't covered anything during the session. So with that, I'm just going to check the chat. Okay, so we have somebody who said, I'm not feeling joy at my job at this time. So I can totally empathize with that. I'd say most people on the call are either in that situation or at some point in their career have felt that. So I want to talk about the most common mistakes, and it sounds quite negative, but most of these are actually really positive behaviors that I see women display time and time again, but unfortunately don't set us up for the success that we want. So the first is, my hard work will speak for itself. The behavior, we believe that our hard work will speak for itself. You show up early, you leave late, you bring work home with you, you're always busy. So why might that actually be a problem? And basically, working harder is not actually scalable. I know in the earlier parts of my career, I think working hard is really important to get to a certain level in your career, probably to middle management. After that, the goalposts sort of move a little bit. Nobody does a great job of educating us on the change or why the change in goalposts. So we double down on working harder. And then anytime we don't get that next promotion or we don't get the sort of the next opportunity, we again work harder. And in the end, something has to give, right? So it's time to sort of question, are you working on activities that are actually important to your organization? So while you might be the busiest person in the office, are you actually working on value added activities? Are you working on the essentials, right? There's so much busy work out there. I know my inbox every day. I would go home at night, think I was on top of everything, come back in the morning, my inbox would have exploded again. And I spent an awful lot of time and energy on my inbox, which wasn't necessarily the most important thing for me to do that day. And you're not advocating for yourself where in this scenario, you think that that hard work will just get recognized and somebody else will do the advocating for you. The other mistake I saw was I'm always willing to help, right? So you never say no, I'm always agreeable, I'm always willing to help. Why is that a problem? You have absolutely no boundaries. And this might be in both your personal as well as your professional life. You are spread too thin. And what that means is you're limiting your impact on any one area. So if you're working on 5 projects or 10 projects, you're probably not being able to contribute the way you would like to be. So you're limiting the impact that you can make, and you're sort of seen as, I'm on a project, but are you leading a project, versus being on one and having that impact and showing your value. And you will end up overworked and not necessarily promoted. And the last one I'm going to talk about a little bit is I am the problem solver in my team. So you're trustworthy, you're seen as a capable pair of hands and extremely reliable. Why that might be a problem is while you're seen as a solid contributor to the team, which is great, and even sometimes referred to as the go-to person, are you seen as a future leader of the organization? Because that's what starts to differentiate at a certain point of your career. So I'd love to know, does this resonate with anybody on the call? As I'm sort of describing this, does this resonate with you as something you do, something you see others doing, something you want to overcome? We have somebody as well in the chat who's sharing, I feel that I'm being overlooked. And I think that's perfectly what we're going to cover tonight. We've had somebody who's just jumped in. Yes, this does resonate with me. I did this call actually earlier tonight at about 6 p.m. And I've had a bunch of messages on LinkedIn and emails since then telling me how much these words and these sort of phrases resonated with everybody. So let's continue on from there. How can you set yourself up for success? And how the right mindset can set you up for success? So a question to ask yourself is, are your beliefs actually holding you back? And by that, I mean, we all have both positive and negative belief systems. So our positive belief systems are setting us up for success. Things like, I'm really good at, I do a good job when. But we all have negative belief systems, and often they come from experiences in our childhood or maybe in early adulthood. So, it could be you were in 3rd grade and somebody told you you're no good at math, you're not a good reader, you're not good at sport. And it's phenomenal the amount of clients I work with where that stuff is still impacting their life today, even though they might have been 8, 9, 10 years of age when they heard it. And those self-limiting beliefs will actually set you up for not only success or failure, but actually dictate the path you take with your career and personal life. So if somebody tells me at 8 or 9 years of age, I'm no good at math, and I believe that and I buy into that statement, I'm going to eliminate a bunch of careers in my potential future that are math related. And while I worked in finance, I can tell you that for the last 10 to sort of 13 years of my career, I was always on the sales side. There was no math involved. And if there was, it was basic math with a calculator. But if I had a self-limiting belief that I'm not good at math, that would have meant I probably would have eliminated the entire finance and banking industry as my career. If you believe I'm not a good communicator, you may not go after roles that involve you having to talk up at meetings or stand up in front of people. The two biggest limiting beliefs that I saw in women I worked with, and I see in clients today, is the inner critic and the imposter syndrome. Now, when we talk about the inner critic, I like to think of, there's this little bad angel sitting on the shoulder. The best piece of advice I ever had is to name that person, name that critic. Somebody on our call earlier apparently calls theirs Regina George from the Mean Girls movie, which I love. But that inner critic is probably talking to you quite a lot during the day. It's saying things like, you can't do that. You're not good enough at that. Why do you think you're capable of that? You're this, you're not that, etc. And it leads us into the imposter syndrome, right? Where we believe that someday somebody will find us out. So my biggest thing was I went into banking at the age of 18. I did not have a degree behind me. And no matter how successful I became in my career, even as a managing director, there was days where I was like, not everybody knows that. I nearly preempted conversations by sharing that because I didn't want somebody to find out another way. And I was managing teams of younger people who were massively more educated than I was, but who all looked up to me. But it didn't stop my imposter syndrome kicking in some days and going, somebody's going to figure out that you're not the right person for this job. Somebody's going to figure out that you've blagged your way through this, and maybe your Irish accent has got you away with this in New York, or you're great at talking to people, so people haven't realized you're not as smart as they think you are, or they're, blowing up their impression of you in their mind. What both of these things do, though, is they create an environment in us where we self-reject. We decide in advance, I'm not going to apply for that job because I'm not good enough. I'm not ready yet. I'm not worthy of that job. I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable enough. I'm not whatever. And all of that does is we self-reject before we even let somebody else do it for us. And the research shows there was it's about 10 or 12 years ago now in the UK, they did not an interview, it was like a research project where they basically put a job posting out, and it had 25 criteria you needed to meet to apply for the job. And most men looked at that, and anywhere between, they had 5 to 10 of the criteria, they felt comfortable for applying. They decided, I'm going to apply, and I am confident in myself that from 10 to 25, I'll learn those skills on the job. That's fine. I'll figure it out. Women had up to 22 of the criteria and decided not to apply because they didn't have everything required. That is 100% the inner critic and the imposter syndrome kicking in, and us lacking the confidence to say, I've got 22 of these capabilities. Of course, if I've already got 22 of these in my career, I'm capable and smart enough that I'm going to be able to figure the other 2 or 3 out when I get on the job. So what we do need to remember is that our beliefs turn into self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you say, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not able to, it's going to be true. You're not going to put yourself in a position to prove that that might be wrong. So how do we change our beliefs? The first thing is we actually have to challenge them. So I talked about this little inner critic on the shoulder, and whatever you like to call it, we'll go with Regina George for now. On the other shoulder should be your good angel, as I like to call them. And your good angel needs to actually challenge your inner critic and say, just because I have a thought does not mean the thought is actually true. So the research shows we have anywhere between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. And 80% of them are the same thoughts that you had yesterday, the day before, and the day before. Now, if you assume that a large portion of those thoughts are negative towards yourself, and you're doing that 80% of the day is on repeat, you can imagine the message that you're drilling into your brain. And this is where the neural pathways come in. You've created this link between the neural pathways that when X happens, you tell yourself why, and you never question it. So now is the time to challenge that belief. When your inner critic pops up and says, hey, you're not good enough, you actually challenge and say, show me the proof in my life that shows me that I'm not good enough to do that job. Or if you tell yourself, we tell ourselves horrendous things about ourselves, whether it's about our physicality, whether it's about our self-image, our self-worth, challenge it. And remember something called the confirmation bias. So the confirmation bias is that you will go look for information that reinforces the belief you have, and you will ignore information that tells you that that belief is incorrect. So even just think of your political views, whatever they might be. If I go on to a news article, I'm probably going to look at the title of it, read the item that sort of reaffirms what I already believe, and ignore the article that gives me information that might tell me that my belief is incorrect. It's the same about your own beliefs about yourself. You're going to get a mid-year review, an end-of-year review, right? We're coming up to that time of the year, depending on what industry you work in. You'll get an end-of-year review. 90% of it will probably be positive, doing a great job, set up for success for the future. And you'll have 2 or 3 pieces that are like, didn't do a great job on this, or needs to work better at this, or needs to create these skills. And you will hone in on that 10%. You will basically ignore the 90% that says how amazing you are and only focus on the 10% that tells you that there's a concern or a problem. And they're often not even a big deal. It's just some good advice your manager is giving you, or a colleague is giving you on how to progress in your career. You need to also change the language we use. We all have a tendency to use quite negative words. I can't, I'm not allowed, I'm not able to. And if you think of some of them, especially words like I'm not allowed, they're very childish, right? It's like, well, you're a grown-up woman. Who decided that you're not allowed except for yourself? So why don't we change those words and actively choose to change those words to things like, I haven't been able to yet. Yet opens up this world of possibilities. So no, you haven't been able to get that promotion yet. But when you leave it as in, I can't get that promotion, I haven't got that promotion, you make it sound, and you're telling your brain that there's a full stop at the end of that sentence. And that means it's inevitable and it's done. There's nothing you can do about changing it. Whereas when you use the word, I haven't gotten that promotion yet, it opens it up to, well, what are we going to do to change that and to get it in the future? And use the power of choice is my final tip on this one. So again, we often feel like we are stuck in a position. We use words like, I'm in a job I hate, I can't get out, I'm stuck here, I'm stuck in a rut, those type of words. But we need to use the power of choice. Like everything we do every day is a choice, passive choice or active choice. So if I stay in a job I hate, I'm still making a choice. It's passive, but I am making a choice to stay there. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't scenarios where that choice is limited, because maybe I'm in a financial situation, maybe there are jobs are not available right now. But again, it's because I haven't found the right next move yet. Okay. Remember, you don't always have control about what happens to you, but you do have control over the language and the choices you use to describe or behave around that. So before we move on to pillar 3, I'd like to stop and see if anybody would like to share sort of any thoughts you have on the inner critic. Does the imposter syndrome show up for you? Do you think your beliefs are sort of setting you up for success or maybe holding you back in any way? So we've got it resonates with me. We've got somebody else who's said it's always held me back. I'd love to know from that person, if it's always held you back, do you think there is a way for you to fix it and move forward? Because self-awareness is fabulous, but it's only one step in the moving forward, right? Because if I'm self-aware enough to know I need to change, there's no point in that unless I actually do change. So for me, for years, I was a smoker. I quit good 10 years ago, but of course I knew I shouldn't smoke. And of course I knew it was horrendous for my health. And of course I knew I should quit. But until I actually took action to quit, that self-awareness was not going to be overly helpful for me. Okay, so this person has come back and said, I have been too helpful rather than serving others as well as myself in career progression. So I understand that. I think as women, and obviously I'm a career coach for women, we are societally programmed to be nice, to be helpful, to be nurturing. So whether that's at home or whether that is in your office environment, we do often tend to be the go-to person because people know A, we're capable, but B, we're going to help because we're programmed nearly to help. Now, that's a generalization, so it may not apply to all of you, but it definitely applied to me and most of the women I worked with. The problem with that, though, is that you set no boundaries and you put everybody else before yourself. And I see it not just with clients in their career, I see it in their personal lives, right? Everybody else's needs, whether it's a partner, whether it's a child, whether it's, family, they go first and they they get whatever sort of left over themselves at the end of it. So whatever little bit of time I have after I take care of everybody else's needs. And I suppose my big message is you have to put yourself first somewhere. There is always a trade-off in life, and every single thing we do, you can't have everything. So what are you willing to trade off? In this case, you're trading off your own career, you're trading off your own mental health and wellness, right? Because you end up feeling dejected and overlooked and overwhelmed and exhausted physically and mentally because you're trying to help everybody else out. And they're not necessarily doing the same, right? Are you a giver or a taker? Guessing of the people on here, if I polled you all, you would tell me you're givers. But you're probably working with a lot of takers as well. And they will continue to take until you have no more to give. So we have somebody who, I've always been too helpful for others. Yeah, we know men are much better than us about bragging, but it just feels embarrassing to blow our own trumpet, especially as imposter syndrome. Most of the time, I don't actually believe it myself. So I totally get that one. And we on pillar 5 are going to cover this in advocating for yourself and how you can find a way to authentically and genuinely do that in a way that feels comfortable to you and doesn't feel like you are blowing your own trumpet. I would also point out here, there is a cultural piece. I know we've got some Americans. I know that came from somebody who's not UK, but lives in London. In Ireland, for example, where I grew up, we would have had a phrase for a woman who bragged and boasted. And it would very much be, you know, the sort of side eye look. And would you look at Joanne over there? Like, who does she think she is? She thinks she's all that. And it was really derogatory. And that was what we were brought up surrounded by. So you never wanted to be that woman or that girl at the time who got that type of feedback. So you became the other extreme, which was, I will never talk about what I do. I will never talk about my achievements. And that is a real hindrance then when you get into the corporate work environment. Somebody else said, putting myself first has come easier in the right environment where I feel valued. And that's great to hear. The question then becomes, how do you create and live in environments where you always feel valued, whether it's personally or professionally? Because if you don't feel valued in an organization, you've got one of two options. It's either you don't feel valued because of the direct team you're working with or manager you're working for. So there could be hundreds. You know, I work for Bank of America. There's 200,000 people in the organization. I had a great career. I would hate to have left because I didn't feel valued by an individual, where there could be other managers that I could have worked for and felt very valued, or it's the organization that I don't like and the values of the organization don't align to mine. So I mentioned earlier, I will send you tomorrow this core values discovery guide. And in that, you start to look at what's truly important to me. And when any client comes to me and uses the words like, I feel stuck in a rush, I feel unfulfilled, I'm lacking purpose, chances are it's because your values are not being met somewhere in your life. And it's either they're personally not being met or professionally. So if like authenticity and trust and empathy and people are some of your core values, and you're working in an organization that lies and has no empathy for its staff, then clearly that's not a match. It's not living up to your values. If your value is money and you're in an organization that pays you well, obviously probably expects a lot of blood, sweat and tears, but pays you well, then your value is being met. And there's nothing wrong with your value, no matter what it is, as long as you have your values aligned and met where you are. And then lastly, we had a comment 2 weeks ago, my manager gave my review and she said that I had to do a better job of advocating for myself. This is very hard for me. Perfect. We are going to cover this off. So let's get moving and I will get there. So what do promotions committees actually talk about? Now, by promotions committees, I'm talking, say in the banking industry, you're a VP, the next sort of 2 grades are director and managing director. VP is what I would call sort of middle management, not necessarily managing teams, but it's sort of the middle part of your career. Director and MD, obviously, as you get a little bit older. So the promotions committees generally tend to focus on those latter, more senior roles. So unfortunately, for all the hard workers and not so great at advocating for yourself people on this call, performance is only a tiny piece of the pie. Research shows that only 10% of career success later, as you get more senior, relates to performance. 30% relates to image, 60% relates to exposure. That's phenomenal, right? And if you think back to the mistakes that I said I saw people make and I made in my career, that working harder, that being that go-to person, all of that, that all accounts for that 10%, right? It doesn't really account for this other 90% we're talking about. And in an ideal world, performance would be the key decider. But unfortunately, in reality, it's your image and it's your exposure. Now, that does not assume the hard work is a tick the box exercise that has to be achieved to move forward, but these are the steps above that that are really important. So the types of things that promotions committees actually talk about is high impact, valuable contribution. They don't talk about, is Trasa busy every day? Is Trasa in the office from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., which I generally was? Is Trasa, does she answer all her emails in 24 hours, which I was trained at a very young age in my career to do? Does Trasa make sure that all her deadlines are met on minor things? Not really that big of a deal. But is Trasa on projects that actually have a valuable contribution to our organization, financially or employee related or client related? What is the perception of Trasa? So when we walk into a committee and my name's put forward for promotion, the first thing is I can normally tell within about a minute which way the promotion committee is going to go. And the reason for that is the way these processes often work is I, as a third party, am doing due diligence on 3 or 4 candidates who I don't know. And I'm interviewing their reference people and I'm interviewing off reference list. And I'm coming back with a recommendation that says, I think Trasa is ready for promotion or I think she's not. But the minute I mention the name of the person, what role they're in, where they're geographically based, etc., you get that body language, right? You either get people who are like, oh yeah, I know that person. Oh, I'm really interested to hear more, or they sort of sit back and fold their arms. And the sit back, fold their arms either comes from one of 2 things. Either I don't know who this person is, and that is the worst thing you want to happen if you're being put forward for promotion, to have senior people on the committee not even know your name. Or 2, there is a perception issue. And as much as we hate perception, right? Perception is all subjective. It's not really tangible to the same extent as facts and figures are. And we hate it. Unfortunately, the people making the decisions, their perception is sort of, reality in their view. So the other things they talk about is leadership skills, right? We don't quantify these in the same way. Again, emotional intelligence, that's not a word you'll necessarily hear in the room, but that is what they're talking about. Emotional intelligence is all about regulation. It's all about social and self-awareness and social and self-regulation. So how do you react to rejection? How do you react to being challenged in a room? How do you react when you have to influence people to get them to do what you need them to do? All of that becomes part of the discussion. How do you communicate with others, right? Emotional intelligence comes back to, we've all worked with people who are toxic. We've all worked with people who get their way by bullying and creating fear. You want to get your way and get your sort of intention and your influence across by being a good leader, by respecting people, by influencing people in the right way, by educating people on why they should work on a project you're working on it because of the value it brings. We've talked a little bit about visibility, and we'll talk about that more when we get to advocating. This is where I think many of you, based on the comments you've shared, are struggling. There's confidence and there's ego. Confidence is, I'm good at my job because I have the facts to prove it. I am a salesperson, or I was a salesperson. My numbers show that I'm good at my job. However, ego is you just going around and making statements about I'm great at this, I'm great at that, I'm fabulous at this, without any supporting facts. I'm not asking you to go to ego place. That's not a comfortable place for most women. And to be honest, it falls apart because sometimes people do find out that that's ego at play. Confidence is fact-based. There's actual supporting evidence that proves you're confident, but you're right in your confidence. Resilience. Resilience is hard. I'm extremely lucky. I grew up in a very small town on the west coast of Ireland with not a lot to do other than sport. So sport was my go-to as a kid and as a teenager. And you built up resilience because you won one week and you lost the next, and you won one week and you lost the next. And when you lost, you didn't call it quits. You didn't walk away. You came back next week and you tried again. It's the same in your career. Just because you haven't got that promotion yet, or you haven't found the perfect job yet, you haven't found it yet. take time, right? I know how disappointing it is. I've been there. You don't get the job you want, or you don't get the promotion that you want. Go away, wallow in your self-pity. It's totally allowed, totally. Just don't stay there for a significant period of time. Take a weekend, a week, whatever you need. For me, go home, put on the fluffy pajamas, eat as much Cadbury's as you possibly can, chocolate, watch some crappy Netflix, and then move into action. Figure out, how am I going to change this? How am I going to make sure that next time round, this doesn't happen again? I've got the feedback, I'm going to do something with it. And then the final few are just energy, positivity, etc. So on this, I'm going to leave you with, on the promotions committee, when was the last time that you actually thought about your personal image and brand? And I don't mean personal image as in my hair looks this way or I dress this way. That might be one piece of it. But if you came to a room and you presented, or you were part of a meeting and you left the room and I asked that group of people how they would describe you, what would you actually want them to say? What are the words you would want them to use to describe you? So for me, it's always been things like energetic, positive, empathetic, good communicator, etc. But what I have to then make sure is, if that's how I want people to describe me, is that how I'm behaving? I used to have a great coach a couple of years ago, and she said to me something that seems very simple, but is much more complex in reality, which is decide who you want to be and then just go be her. And that sounds so simple, but what you need to do is, who do I want to be? What do I want to be known as? What do I want to be known for? And what's the habits and behaviors that her is showing every day? So if I say I want to be seen as somebody who's energetic and positive, and I go to bed at 2 o'clock tonight because I watch Netflix, and I get up and I roll into the office at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm not having a habit or a behavior that's setting me up for that to be seen as part of my brand. If I want to be positive, but I'm that person who's always like, oh, I can't believe we have more work to do, then I'm not going to have that brand that I want to. Okay. So I'm going to stop there for a second and see any thoughts or questions about promotions committees, how they work, what your personal brand is, etc. I'm just checking the Q&A. Okay, nothing there for the moment. So I am going to move on to strategy. I want to keep an eye on time for us. Yeah, we're good. So strategy. So now that we know some of the most common mistakes that we've often made, and some of you have said those resonate with you, we've talked about the beliefs and how they resonate. We've talked about what the promotions committees actually want to see. Now we need to think about the strategy. So how do you go forward with this information? And the first thing I would say to you is that only you can take control and define the strategy for your career. So while today we're going to talk a little bit high level, because obviously each of you has a unique situation, I would recommend that you go away and elaborate on the strategy we discuss on specifically how you're going to implement that for you. And we're coming up towards the end of the year. I'm hoping after such a manic year that all of you have a little bit of time off over the holidays. You get some time for self-reflection. I've never been a big fan of New Year's Eve per se, but I do love the positivity of a new year and the idea of that, just that sense of what's possible. And again, I'm going to go back to the fluffy pajamas and the Cadbury chocolate. But, you know, when I lived in New York, I would often go back to New York after being home with my family on like the 29th or 30th of December. And I would plan New Year's Eve as a me day. And I would watch crappy movies, probably The Grinch or something Christmassy. But I would also sit down with a journal or my diary and define a couple of goals for the year, because it's exciting. It's like, what can I achieve this year? And that's what you need to do. What are the 2 or 3 goals that you're going to go after for your career next year? So, you know, with the clients that I work with, obviously we're predominantly focused on career. There is some life and health coaching in there, but once they define a clear strategy, over 80% of them either achieve promotion or get a new job that they want within 1 year. So that's not me trying to blow my own trumpet. That's saying once a woman gets clear on her strategy, that's the type of success that she can have. And all it takes is getting clear on the strategy. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, are you in a job that plays to your strengths? Because often what happens is when we're in big companies or big organizations, they move us around at will because it suits them. They have a need, they have a requirement to have you in a certain place to plug a gap. Especially if you're that trustworthy, capable, reliable person, you could get moved around quite a bit. But are you in a job that plays to your strengths? So if you are fabulous at data analytics and somebody's put you into a sales role, or if you are fabulous at communicating with clients, but somebody's put you into data analytics role, then clearly you're not being set up for success. And that's where it feels like you're sort of trying to push that mount up the mountain. Make sure you're in a job that plays to your strengths. And if you're not today, use your strategy to define what your strengths are and what job you might need to be in. So define specific goals. The amount of times I get vague goals that are, I want to get promoted. Okay, why do you want to get promoted? What do you want to get promoted to? What's the timeline that you're going to do that in? Be very, very clear about what that is. Be very clear about what you need to do to achieve this. So for some jobs or some careers, you might need additional education. For others, it might be just, I need to be seen to advocate for myself if that's the feedback you've got, or actually your performance is a little bit under par, we need to see you get up to X. But be very clear and ask, who or what can help me to achieve this? So it could be your manager, it could be your peer group, it could be a mentor outside of your group, but let's start figuring out who and what can help. Now, what you do need to remember is you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything. And I know that goes against the lovely world that we live in right now that says, dream big, go after everything. And I'm all about dreaming big, but know that there are always trade-offs. If I need to double down on my career this year because my number one focus is getting that promotion, what am I trading off, right? It's probably going to take more time and more energy. So that has to come from somewhere. Same as if I have a New Year's resolution that says I want to go to the gym for an hour every day next year. There's a trade-off, right? If I'm making that my number one priority, what am I giving up? I'm either giving up an hour of sleep, I'm giving up an hour in the office, I'm giving up an hour with family and friends. And that doesn't mean it's the wrong decision, but I just have to be comfortable with what I'm trading off there, right? So this is where essentialism plays in. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And in it, he talks a lot about, when the word priority was created, it was a singular. There was no plural for priority. And over the years, I don't know that I've ever heard priority in its singular in most corporate settings. It's always priorities. And the problem with that is when you start to get to 10, 12, 15, 20, whatever the number is of priorities, then nothing is a priority anymore. So really, you do need to pick, realistically, if they're big goals, probably 2 to 3 for the entirety of 2021. And it might be I have one career goal and one personal goal. But be clear and be brutal. What's truly important to you and what are you willing to give up for it? Networking, networking, and networking. Now, when we talk about networking, most of you have this image of being in this horrible room with a bunch of people you don't know and having to walk around and talk to them and tell them what you do and ask them what they do. I don't mean that uncomfortable networking. I do mean creating a network within the organization that you work in that has your back. That could be peers, that can be senior people, that can be junior people. We often underestimate the value of people who are junior to us. Just because they may not be on a promotions committee does not mean that they can't dramatically influence our lives. But figure out who it is. And if you're anything like me, I am fabulous with a to-do list. But networking was never on my to-do list earlier in my career. So it was that thing I always procrastinated on. And I remember the year I didn't get VP, I was told by my boss, you need to network more. You need to advocate for yourself more. And I went away with it really, really annoyed because I thought I shouldn't have to do this. I work really hard. You already see how hard I work. But what I realized was I spent no time getting to know the people I worked with because I was so focused on that to-do list. And that's what I thought would create success and was success. That what I decided was to use that strength of mine of being task orientated to play to my benefit. So I added networking to it. And I basically came up with a list of 50 people across a massive organization that I worked with. Your number could be 10, 20, 50. But I was going to network with one of them every week. That's not that big a deal, right? One a week for 50 weeks, give or take, probably with a couple of holidays thrown in. But all I had to do was find a reason. And I didn't go talk to these people for the sake of it, right? Some of these people, you run into them at the printer. How was your weekend? How was your family? It doesn't have to be formal. Others, it was like, hey, I'd love to get time in your diary, but I would always have a reason. Do not go to people who are extremely busy people and senior to you in the organization and say, can we have a coffee? Explain to them what you want. If it's somebody who's existing in your network, I'd love to catch up and hear what's going on in your team. One of the things I found really helpful was going to senior managers. When I was on the sales side of the house, we worked closely with our product partners. But what we were all really bad at was I never knew what the product team's goals were, and they never knew what mine were. I was like, well, how am I going to help you achieve your goals or vice versa if we don't actually know what they are? So at the start of the year, I would try and get some time with different product managers and say, I'd love to hear what your 2021 goals are. How can I help you? How can you help me? So have a purpose. And then sponsors are a little bit different, right? So mentors and networking, your mentors are there for guidance, they're there for advice, but a sponsor is somebody senior who's advocating for you. There's somebody who, if you're sitting around a table, a senior group, and there's talk of an open role, they're going to be saying, oh, I think Trassa would be good for that role. Or I think Trassa has the skills for that role, right? They're actually actively thinking about you. And it's hard to walk up to somebody and say, hey, will you be my sponsor? But you create environments by networking that you know, and you've got high emotional intelligence as women, you know who's sort of open to that. You know, based on their behavior, whether they're the type of people that would do that for you. And then finally, advocate for yourself. I know it would be fabulous if everybody else did it for us, but they're just not going to. And then finally, I would say pay it forward. So there is research that shows while it can be uncomfortable as women to advocate for ourselves, and how we do it is very important on whether we're successful or not, what the research does show is that corporates and individuals within corporates love it when women advocate for other people. So advocate for each other. Buddy up with a friend at work. Maybe you're not comfortable advocating for yourself, but that person has a forum where they could advocate for you, and vice versa. And I don't mean advocating like going around and saying, Trassa's great. Did you see what Trassa did? Trassa's great. But I mean, when you're at meetings that they're saying, oh, well, I worked on a project with Trassa last week and she came up with this idea. That's a fact. That's not something that's bragging or feels uncomfortable. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second. Any questions or comments or thoughts at this point? Okay. I'm just going to come out of here so as I can check. Okay, so let's continue on. So advocating for yourself, the part that I think most of you are not as comfortable with. Remember, you can't rely on others, right? So even if you have a sponsor, what happens is most people are so engaged in their own career and so engaged in their own thoughts, they're just not thinking about you. How many times has somebody behaved a certain way to you and you've been like, oh God, I must have done something wrong, or, oh, they don't seem to like me today, or, you know, whatever it is. And we immediately assume it's about us. And that's our ego kicking in, that if somebody's behaving a certain way, it must be about me. 99% of the time, nothing to do with you. It's all about them. They had a bad night's sleep. They had a fight with their partner. They, you know, got it shouted at by their boss this morning. So remember, it's not about you. Other people aren't thinking about you most of the time. And that's why you need to be thinking about you. So how do we advocate? As women, we find it much more comfortable to advocate for ourselves when we have facts and we put figures to those facts. So often we'll say things like, well, you know, I worked on this project and we really helped improve the process on X. And somebody says, can you quantify the value of that to the organization? We're like, well, not really. It's just, it saved a bit of time. You can put a number to that, right? You can say, well, we improved X process, saved on average 10 hours a month for this team. If you assume your own pay, whatever it is, right? Say it's $10 an hour. So we saved $100 a month for the organization, $1,000 a month, bad math for the banker. We saved $1,000 a month for the company. That's $12,000 a year. Or we eliminated the requirement for X. That requirement has a cost, and they're guesstimates, but they're realistic guesstimates. You're not blowing the numbers up and making them out of thin air. They're coming from something, but collate those facts and where possible, put figures on them. And you know, what was really frustrating as a manager, I'll be honest, was I worked on this project, but so did 40 other people. What did you do on the project? that showed that you added value to the project. Because I can guarantee you every woman on this call will tell me they've been on a project with 40 other people and maybe 25 of them did no work. They turned up to the call every week. They never seemed to have the action items. They never did the follow-up. Maybe they didn't even bother to turn up the calls. But that person wrote in their year-end review, I was on X project. So collate the facts and be detail orientated about what you've actually achieved. And don't, your end of year review should not be things like, I was on this project, I went and saw these clients. What was the outcome of you going seeing those clients? Did you convert those into leads and opportunities? Did you convert those into sales? Again, maybe you don't have opportunities that you closed this year, but you have created opportunities that are ongoing conversations worth X amount for next year. So don't underestimate the potential also of what you've created. Deliver it in a factual manner. It can be very, very easy to get emotional about things, especially as we get pushback. So if you're in a performance review and you're getting feedback that you don't like and you disagree with the feedback, because in my experience, I've got feedback which I didn't like, but was also true. And I've gotten feedback I didn't like that I didn't believe was true. In the first scenario, I think where you don't believe it's true, I think you factually need to respond and share that I don't think you have the full story, or there's an extra piece of information I'm not sure you're aware of. Or you say, do you know what? That's the first time I'm hearing that piece of feedback. I need to go away and think about that. Is it okay to arrange a follow-up discussion about that? But make sure you stay in the factual and you stay away from the emotional side of things. Be clear and direct about your achievements. So no cotton wooling, the little fluffy stuff that's like, well, I think I did an okay job of possibly being, I did a good job because I achieved X. End of discussion. You do not need to apologize. How many emails have you sent over the last year that said, sorry for chasing you, apologies that I didn't get back to you quicker? And in those cases that you're saying, sorry for chasing you, you know that you're in the right here. You know that the person on the other end of that should have responded to you by now. They're well past a deadline. They haven't even acknowledged that they've got it. But here you are trying to soften it by apologizing. Do not apologize. Be clear and direct about everything. Obviously, I'm not saying be a bully or be rude or be obnoxious, but be direct. Ask for what you need. Tell what you've achieved and accomplished, and be open about your goals. So as a manager, it's great. Promotion processes are not a one-year thing. In most cases, they're 2, 3, 4, 5-year journeys. I would rather know the minute you become a VP, hey, by the way, my aspiration is to become a director. Now, I know that's going to be 3 years down the line minimum, but let's think about it. And I enjoyed being a manager, right? And I knew that my job was to help and advocate for my team. What I said to them, though, was, it's your job to give me the ammunition to go advocate for you. But we could sit down, if we know we've got a 3-year plan, we can create a strategy. We can actually now start laying the groundwork for that in 3 years' time versus 6 months before the promotion process starts. Now we're like, oh crap, you don't have the visibility that you need. Don't have had enough exposure. What are we going to do to fix that? Let's preempt that. So the more open you are about your goals, you don't have to be super aggressive about it. You just make them known to the right people. And ask for help, feedback, and guidance. We often think that asking for help is a negative and it's perceived as a weakness. It's not. I don't know who can get to career success in whatever they do without having had some help and guidance along the way. So I'm going to stop there for a moment. I know there was a couple of people on who had shared that they were this was a concern for them, that they didn't feel comfortable advocating for themselves. So I'm going to stop and ask, does that help? Is there any other specific questions you might have that I could help you with about how best to advocate for yourself? Okay, let's see here. So we have somebody who said, this is great. I really like these ideas. That's great. Is there anything else that I've not covered on the advocating that anyone would find helpful, or a specific scenario or things that you have coming up that I could help with? No? Okay. We have somebody else who said definitely helped. So that is good to hear. So I am going to continue on. So Find a unique style to advocate for yourself. I've really struggled with this in my career, but between having a good network, investing time, because often we see that investing time in the network as sort of a waste of time, like I had a coffee with somebody today. But actually, if you look at spending 30 minutes at your desk answering emails versus 30 minutes networking with that person, I can tell you longer term which has a most valuable return on your time investment. You have to find a way that feels comfortable for you. So bragging and ego was always uncomfortable for me, but being factual, that was really helpful. So how are you going to move forward with your career in 2021, right? There's stay where I am, do nothing different. There's follow a proven roadmap to success. So one of the things I'd love to make you all aware of is a career accelerator program that I run. And it's a 12-week program to help women regain clarity and get back on track. So figure out exactly what do I want? What are those goals? How do I go after them? Identify your strengths, figure out, am I in the right job? If I'm not, how do I get to the right job? But also learn key skills to navigate and accelerate your career. I like to call it playing the game. And week 11 of our program is figure the game out or choose to leave the game. And choosing to leave the game is not a failure. Choosing to leave the game is saying, I'd rather put my time and energy somewhere else. Find the confidence to go after the career you actually want. And it's also specifically designed for women. It's based on not only my own experiences, the other women I worked with, but also the clients that I've worked through this with. Short term, how the program works, it's 12 one-to-one sessions. There's also a 30 and a 90-day post-completion bonus session. And those are because, we can create the best strategy in the world in our 12 one-to-one sessions, but you need to go out and actually do something. And one of the hardest things is holding yourself accountable. If you say you're going to network, you're actually going to do it. And as nice as I can be, I can also kick ass when I need to kick ass. And that's where the holding accountable comes into things. And also there's access to a private Facebook group of like-minded women. So total value normally for the program is $2,995. For a very short period of time, I'm cutting that down to $1,995. But that's only until the end of this year. So one of the people who's gone through my program, by the end of the year, I received a promotion to a role I'd always wanted. She did that by simply giving me the confidence I knew I had. She, being me, influenced me to make the right decisions to get to where I am today. So the offer expires on 31st of December. All you need to do, and by the way, you can book a discovery call with me. There is no commitment. It's a complimentary discovery call to see if the style and the programs that I have could help you, and also whether we will work well together, right? You have to gel with somebody if you're going to work well with them. So it's for between the discovery calls between now and the end of the year, but obviously then for start dates in January. So there's an option then on payment also of 3 payments of $665 or 1 payment of the full amount. So I'll email you tomorrow. There'll be a link in there where you can book a discovery call if you want to. Obviously, again, no obligation, a discovery call. I love hearing about women. I love hearing about their careers. My passion is to get more women to senior tables and not only get a seat at the table, but get a voice at the table. I'm so frustrated over my career to see how few women in banking were managing directors. By the time I left the team I was part of in New York, there was 14 MDs on the floor. 2 of us were women. When I left, there was 1 woman left, and both of us were white and both of us were non-mothers. So if you're anybody who's more racially diverse than, pale skinned person over here, or you're a mother, you would look up at that table and go, there's nobody there who looks like me. And if there's nobody there who looks like me, it's very hard to believe that I can get there. And that's what I want to change. So why you're here, right? You're probably here because you want to navigate and accelerate your career successfully. You want to move away from any of those emotions we talked about at the start, whether it's overlooked or overwhelmed or feeling stuck. And you want to define a strategy, right? You need to take ownership of your career. You need to define what the strategy is and move it forward to help you succeed in your career. And you also know that we all need a little helping hand at times, right? Whether that's from somebody like me, whether it's you reading a blog, whether it's having a mentor at work. Own up to the fact that help is there for a reason and that we all needed to succeed. I never would have got to where I did in my career without numerous men and women who supported me along the way. So there's a couple of things as well that I know that when I mention my courses, there's a lot of I don't have times, or is it worth it, or will it work for me? Honestly, get on a call with me. We'll work through those questions. I can tell you that you do have time, because taking the time to do something like this, whether it's a 10 tonight session, it's an hour. I'm hoping, even if you took away 2 tips of something you're going to do differently tomorrow, or it's going to help you define the strategy, then a 1 hour investment to your time is definitely worth it. Is it worth it? To me, that's like asking, are you worth it? And the answer to that is definitely yes. Will it work for me? That's what the discovery call is, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everybody I get on a discovery call with is an ideal candidate, because it's hard work, right? You have to challenge yourself. You have to ask yourself questions. You have to dig deep. You have to be willing to try new things. And if that's not for you, then most of the time we don't go past a discovery call with those clients, because if that comes out, there's no point you investing your time or me investing mine, and you investing your time and your effort and your money and not getting success. We want to set people up for success. So with that, I'm going to, sorry, I did the wrong thing there, hit that button. The last thing I want to say before I open it up to any other Q&A, I know we're coming up towards the end of the time, is this is my new phrase. This is a phrase, by the way, I apologize to the Americans. Fecking in Ireland is not a swear word. It's barely like even saying crap. But it's a phrase we have in our family. Anytime any of us, I'm one of 3 girls, 3 sisters, if anybody's feeling down or a little bit demoralized, we're like, P.S., don't forget you're fecking amazing. And by that, we mean no matter how much that inner critic is talking to you, no matter how much that imposter syndrome is kicking in, it's not true. If you're on this call today, you either already are in a successful career or on your way to a successful career, are a woman who's in a growth mindset, who wants to learn, who wants to invest in herself, who wants to succeed. You're already fucking amazing. And anything from here is just a positive. It's just a plus. So with that, I can see that I have a comment here. Somebody has just said, thanks, Tressa, very enlightening session. We have officially 2 minutes left. It is nearly midnight here in Ireland, well past my bedtime, I have to say. So I'm just going to open it up and see if there are any questions in the Q&A or the chat that anybody would like to share at this point. And while I'm waiting to see you all valiantly give me loads of questions, because I love responding to questions, just a reminder, I will send out an email tomorrow, the Core Values Discovery Guide. It's just a PDF that's going to be in there. Take the time over Christmas. It's great to just know what your core values are. Great to know what's important to you. And it's surprising how much that changes over the course of your life. So what were your core values in your teens and your 20s and your 30s and your 40s will be different decade by decade. We've had somebody else just jump in saying, thank you so much. It's been worthwhile for me to attend this session. I've learned so much. I love to hear that. That's great. And I hope not only have you learned things, but I hope you've learned practical things that you can go away and actually implement in your job starting tomorrow. I have had somebody just tell me I'm fecking amazing. So thank you. I love hearing it. My mother will probably tell me that in the morning as well, which is great. The joys of staying with your parents in your 40s when COVID happens and you happen to be here. Okay, I think that are all the questions. I'm just going to do a last double check of the chat. But yes, that's it. Thank you everybody so much for joining. Please wake up tomorrow morning reminding yourself that you are fecking amazing. Go have a great evening or night or wherever you might be. And I look forward to speaking to you all or seeing you all at future webinars.